as we move to our next conversation, I want to call back to some trends and themes we've been hearing throughout the past couple of days, and really for the past couple of years. The consumerization of the enterprise, data capabilities, data-centric learning, stackable credentials, employee engagement, a portfolio of digital skills. All remind me of phrases that our next presenter has been talking about for the past 10 years. David Blake, founder and CEO of Degreed. How would I describe David? I'm going to actually go to davidblake.com. Headline, David Blake, and I quote, "The future belongs to the learners," which I think is incredibly well said, as well as the bio that you just texted me for yourself. David is the founder and CEO of Degreed. He's also the founder and CEO of Book Club. Millions of individuals and hundreds of organizations use Degreed's platform to discover and answer all of their learning skills. Book Club's mission is to help teams apply the wisdom of the world's best books. Prior to Degreed, he helped launch a competency-based, accredited university and was a founding team member of university admission startup Zinch, acquired by Chegg. He's also the co-author of the book, The Expertise Economy, How the Smartest Companies Use Learning to Engage, Compete, and Succeed. He's a sought-after expert on the topic of the future of work and learning, and a McKinsey senior advisor on the future of work. So welcome to the stage, all the way from Silicon Valley, David Blake, and GSV principals, Kevin Zhang.
Hello, it's wonderful to be here. My name is Kevin Zhang. I'm a proud principal of GSV Ventures, and it is really an honor and a privilege to be here with my friend David Blake. GSV has had the honor to be involved with David's entrepreneurial journey for about a decade after Deborah Quazzo's angel investment many years ago. And as I've gotten to know you, David, over the last few years, I was reflecting on how I would sum you up in a few words. And I got 3 words. It's attacking problems tenaciously. That's David Blake. When David sees a problem, he attacks it with incredible tenacity. In the world of lifelong learning, he has been a 4-time EdTech entrepreneur. He was fed up with American partisanship, so decided to run for vice president. And as a parent, he was concerned about his children's schooling and decided to do a micro school himself, which was, I thought, incredibly admirable. And so for this audience, many of whom are getting to know you for the first time, take us back to the original problem that you were trying to solve with Degreed and how much progress you've made in the last decade.
Appreciate that, Michael, Kevin, for the introduction. So the original problem, Michael Spence won a Nobel Prize for proving that higher education works even if no one learns a single thing, as long as it is expensive. And he used that term expensive as an economic term. It just had to be hard. And it works because the primary role of higher education is not to teach anyone anything. It was to filter everyone in and out. And said differently, the role that higher education historically was playing in society was not of educator, but of credentialer, signaler, and filtering. And when I read that, that was like the most depressing thing I could imagine. Higher education doesn't have to teach me anything. It just has to be in a complex high bar, and we see which kids can jump over the bar and which can't, and that's how we're gonna sort everyone in and out of jobs. And so I became really passionate about, while a lot of the market was looking at content and democratizing education, I became obsessed with this question of the credential and the signal. And that was the genesis of the first company I founded, Degreed. And Degreed's mission is to jailbreak the college degree.
It's been an incredible amount of progress in the last decade, but the last 5 years have been really interesting for you. Degree now obviously is a global company, Series D backed company, reaches most of the Fortune 500. But over the last 5 years in particular, you personally have had a really interesting journey. You elevated to executive chairman, you founded 2 more edtech companies, and now you're back at Degreed as CEO after the acquisition of LearnIn. So talk to this group about what does the next decade of Degreed look like? What's the next problem you're looking to solve with Degreed?
Yeah, I mean, just the arc of the last 10 years to touch on that quickly. I'm an elder millennial, so I am just old enough that when I started Degreed, I still had a binder of newspaper clippings that I had cut out. I had cut out every article I ever found from any journalist willing to question the sanctity of the university. And I had found like 3 articles. And fast forward 10 years later, we really are seeing a shift. In America, both Donald Trump and President Biden, in the State of the Union address, have both mentioned how they have intentions of moving more of the federal government to skills-based hiring. So nonpartisan issue, both sides are looking at it that way. And to think in sort of 10 years that people have been willing to look at a future that is primarily skills-driven, I think is a huge amount of progress. And yet there's still an enormous amount of progress left to go. In terms of coming back to Degreed, I would state it this simply. 10 years ago, what happened was the market collectively did democratize education. There was this Cambrian explosion of learning content, the MOOCs and otherwise. And so all of a sudden, there was many platforms, providers, and modalities of learning, and that created a need. And so Degreed created this layer that would help people track all of their learning across all of the platforms, all of the providers. And that was very useful to enterprise organizations who otherwise their corporate LMS wasn't built to help them get their arms around it. Well, today, skills data has exploded. Many of the learning providers are starting to report based on competency and skills. The HCM solutions like performance management and talent mobility systems are starting to speak the language of skills. But they all speak a different language. They all use different ontologies and taxonomies and leveling systems. So the same way 10 years ago content exploded, was very fractured, now skills data has exploded and is very fractured. And Degreed is building the layer that sits on top of that to unify that fractured ecosystem and make it all work well together.
Thank you. And I hear data, I hear language, I hear skills. I don't hear AI yet, but I imagine that's part of this vision too, because it feels like just like a perfect application of these large language models in this next phase of Degreed. Talk about how you're thinking about integrating generative AI in the next wave of Degreed.
Yeah, if we had come to this thesis 2 years ago, it honestly probably would have meant having to hire dozens of data scientists to work on the NLP models ourselves. But now this is a task that AI is exceptionally good at, and much of the problem we will be able to use other AI engines to complete the task. There's some sort of use case specific things that we've got to wrap around it, but it's a new frontier.
Switching gears a little bit, we're here in India, and I've really been struck by you're an American visionary, but having met some Indian visionaries over the last couple of days, I've really been struck by just the incredible appetite of folks here to learn. There's one guy in particular, Mr. Pawar from NIIT, who's been sitting in front row the entire conference, listening and taking notes, which I'm so impressed by for a man who runs a public company. Talk about, for you, what do you think American entrepreneurs can learn from India?
I think just incredible respect for the entrepreneurs and the businesses that are getting built. I mean, to watch the way in which they have scaled, first here in India, but now globally, I mean, is just mad hops, mad respect. So I think there's an enormous amount that we can learn. I think the dynamics are different, and that's part of, what I'm trying to key into. When Degreed came to India, 2016, 2017, and I found, there's no substitute for spending time in each country, in each region that you launch. And there's a lot that is very singular about the India market, and I really love it.
And what do you think India can learn from America in terms of the future of learning and skills?
Well, so one big difference. So Korn Ferry is the data I have in my head. There's others. But India is the only major economy left in the entire world that is not projected to have a major skills gap over the next 10 years. Every other major economy in the world has a growing skills gap. So that creates a really interesting dynamic, which is the rest of the world is having to grapple with having not enough skilled workers. And what that is creating is it's creating a accelerated tolerance for looking at talent in new ways and sort of a post-credential world, as well as the need to upskill their workforce, because if they don't, they can't just go out to the market anymore and hire it. And so while the rest of the world is sorting that out, India does have the benefit of having enough education pipeline and enough people coming through that pipeline to meet the needs of the next decade. And so it'll be really interesting to see, while the rest of the world is sorting out kind of their problems, India has a unique context, and what will that mean? Does India have an opportunity to leapfrog? Will India be benefited by not having the skills gap, or will India potentially sort of be late to the game in figuring out what it looks like to be in a post-credential world?
And so what do you recommend for entrepreneurs building in this space? We see Emeritus here and a bunch of others who have really built these massive consumer businesses with credentialing, with that offering. How do you think about navigating the next few years for those entrepreneurs? How would you think about it?
Parallel track it. McKinsey research, it's about 2 months old now. Skills-based hiring is 3.5 times more effective than credential-based hiring, and it's twice as effective as hiring based on work experience. Right now, it is the most effective way known to man to hire someone, is skills-based hiring. So even if you're in the game of offering credentials, you should start parallel tracking the signaling of skills and start parallel tracking skills as a currency. Because at some point that pressure will come, that transition will come, and you will be in a much better place if you have sort of been doing it the whole time than if you are forced to figure that out under pressure.
Switching gears a little bit, and in the final few minutes that we have, we've covered your passion for attacking this problem of lifelong learning. I'd love to dig in a little bit into your experience thinking about micro schools and children. I don't think any of us would be here if we didn't care about young people. And we had this amazing experience with Team GSV visiting a school a couple days ago in India, just a few miles from here. What world do you hope to leave behind for your children?
Yeah, I really hope my kids never have to become a matriculated student in a university. I hope that concept is gone. I hope that everything my kids do stacks. I hope that my kids never feel like they graduated, because I hope that they feel like they are learners over the entirety of their lives, that the journey never had a culmination, that it never had an end, just that they're always on another step along the journey. You know, and I hope ultimately it comes down to, I hope that they feel alive and alive when they are able to learn something new.
And I want to bring back to the very top as well as we end on this one. How can we cultivate a similar tenacity that you have in attacking problems?
You know, it's just the right combination of obsessive compulsive and you know, just the right trauma at just the right stages in the journey. You know, it's I think I tell people I'm an education reformer by choice and entrepreneur by necessity. I actually really quite I have no love for the entrepreneurial journey. For me, it's sort of a requisite evil to be in this life of getting to build something and getting to build this future of education. For me, you have to fall in love with the problem. It's advice many people have given, but that's what you have to be in love with. Because if it's for anything else, I've just found all the rest of it comes and goes and ultimately can't add up to enough to keep me in the fight, to keep me in the game. But if you fall in love with the problem, you know, I've always just found that it just keeps bringing me back.
We have time for a couple questions. Anyone in the audience want to ask David a question? Yes.
David, this is Aubrey here. Wonderful hearing your story. Entrepreneur as an essential. How did you manage to get this journey 4x as an entrepreneur? How was that? Sorry, I believe you were an entrepreneur 4 times, right?
Yeah.
So how did that essential become such a obsessive, compulsive journey?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's maybe a platitude I could put behind it or give you the actual answer, which is, you know, how did it actually happen? It happened for me when I sat for the ACT. So that's the entrance exam I sat for in the United States. And I sat there, I was graduating at the top of my class. I was a great student. It wasn't about the test. I was well prepared for it. I had studied for it. I got a great score on it. But it just bit me in the ass. Out of nowhere, I looked around and I was like, this can't be for real. This can't be how the grown-ups all got together and decided that this is the best you can do. Really, this 3.5 hours on a Saturday morning, this is how you're going to sort all of us in and out of our futures? Like, this can't be real. This can't be what all the grown-ups decided was the best idea. And I was so disenthralled. I was so, frustrated by the fact that this was actually it. This is how the grown-ups decided that we're going to sort it all out. And I just felt like there's got to be a better way. And I was so sort of chip on my shoulder, frustrated, disenchanted with it that, you know, it gave me enough fire in the belly to decide I was going to do something about it. I'm an elder millennial. I'm just old enough that I went and I tried to get answers. Why do we do it this way? No one knew. This is pre-Google, so I went to the library. I couldn't find any books telling me about high-stakes testing. So I did find some books on the history of the education system. And once I really began to appreciate that it was a system and I'm a product of the system, I really began to dislike what the system had turned me into. And that was, I was good at test taking and I was good at memorizing. And I realized that those books that I had checked out of my library were the first books I had ever truly studied that a teacher hadn't assigned to me. And what I realized, graduating at the top of my class, was that I was an excellent student and a terrible learner. And man, I just felt cheated. I'd made it all the way through my high school education and was a terrible learner. And that was enough, there's just enough anger in there to keep me going.
That's terrific.
Perfect. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, David. All right, home stretch. Home stretch. I think we're the bottom of the 20th. Is that right? Is that the right analogy? Good.